Is this still pouring out there? Noah, can you hear me? Is he up there? If he could, Andrew, if he's up there, if you could ask him to put something on the live stream that we're going to be delayed maybe 5, 10 minutes. There he is. Noah, do you have the ability to do that? Can you put on the live stream? We'll be delayed a few minutes, or just leave it there and put a message. Come under there. Yeah, put it in the comments that because of the weather, I'm gonna hold off a few minutes, give everybody a chance to get in. So, it rained outside. If you didn't know that already, but what it also did is that it rained and knocked out our Wi-Fi. Imagine that. So, our Wi-Fi right now. So, I have no idea whether we are live. We were hoping there's a lot of people that wanted to watch it. I'm hoping that we are. They're working on it as we speak, but our internet got knocked off, so I'm not certain whether we are live or not. But we're going to go ahead and get started as they're working behind the scenes trying to see if they can get it back up. So this is really Q&A, anything that you want to ask. We've got two guys. I think Nathan and JC are going to have mics. That becomes less important if we're not online, but still for everybody to hear. Let's go ahead, and if you've got a question, use the microphone so that everybody can hear it. For the questions that involve the project here in the sanctuary, that will be one that got two Tims here, so that Tim will answer. His responses, though, won't be for many of the other questions. So anything outside of the project here, those are not going to be questions that he'll be answering. I'm going to do my very best. We'll be honest. There's other deacons that are here who have walked through this process. So if they want to add to anything that I say about any of those questions, I'm going to ask them to please do that. But we want to be completely candid and 100% transparent to answer any of your questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to ask Tim to come up here with me. And we are at your disposal for any questions that you might have. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for a wonderful Lord's Day. We thank you for a great day in your house. And we pray now during this time of Q&A, as we talked this morning, this is not the most important thing. These are tools. The most important thing is that you've called us to go out into the world and make disciples of all nations. And so, Lord Jesus, I pray that we do that and we do that well. Lord, let us have clarity tonight and give us wisdom as we approach these very weighty and important matters. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Tim, I'm going to have you come up, if you will. Will you introduce Tim to us? And we'll get started that way.
Well, good evening, church family. It's an honor to be with you again. I'm glad you got here safely. And I'm Tim Songster. I'm the president of Costco and Associates. And with me is Tim Pierce, who's an architect on our team, who's been a part of the team of architects and engineers, who's been studying this campus and coming up with your staff and your leadership the right answer and the plans of what we presented. So it's an honor to be with you tonight.
Questions? Raise your hand and we will bring a mic to you. Sure, yes, ma'am. The big changes here. Well, I guess if you're not going to build it now, that's a big change too. But the big changes in here. So I'm going to let them explain more because I'm not my world. But imagine that if you were to go around this perimeter starting there around, it'll be walled up, acoustically engineered so that our sound issues are fixed. The seating capacity, 799, was 75 in the choir, 25 for the orchestra. We will be adding 14 classrooms for educational space. And you'll be creating a preschool wing on the bottom with an entrance area there secured for sign-in. Children would come through, sign in the same place, secure area. They'll come through. Children's space would all be in the top. And then the two, if you imagine sitting right here where there's that dividing line, keeping the risers there. And there'll be a children's church. And I think that was 120 that it could seat. And then on the other side would be a multi-purpose room, which would seat in the 80 to 90 adults. And that would be a choir room as well. The rest of the big picture plan that's the removal of A and B. So you would be moving your office over to where the preschool is now, because the preschoolers would be coming here. And you would be, Spanish church would be moving into the fellowship hall. and then that's the sale of the property across the street. That's the encompassing all of what's across the street. So that's the big picture of all of it together. Yeah. Let's get a microphone.
I have a big voice. I am concerned that children need the space to run around and be children and not have to be told to be quiet all the time. Are you concerned at all that there will be a noise problem with the children inside the sanctuary?
I'm gonna let y'all answer that.
It's a great question. No, ma'am, we're not, because we're doing a couple things to avoid that issue. Number one, we're building a sound wall, an acoustical wall along the rear of the worship center here. And that sound wall is also going to have a space, a corridor between that and the start of the rooms. So the education rooms will have a space, an airspace of about, is it 6 feet wide? 6 feet wide. And then another wall, which is going to, again, help with acoustics. So it's a really good idea to have that break in space between the walls. And even if you didn't have that, you could do it with a sound wall, a double wall. But we're going to do both. So I'm really not concerned about the transfer of sound and noise from the children this way. So she asked, are we going to flatten the balcony area? So yes and no. There are areas in a balcony to the far left and right of you that are going to, see what we did, let me back up a minute. We brought in our structural engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, architects, contractors. We came in here and studied this building and crawled through nearly every space, literally. And I'll tell you this, first of all, this building was very well built. And one of the things that we saw was some of the nice structural systems and the layout of this building allowed us a lot of flexibility to do some of the things we're doing. And because it was so well built, that makes some of the things that we're trying to accomplish very easy. So on the left side here, we're going to flatten the floor, and on the right side, very extreme right of the balcony, we're going to flatten the floors so that we have areas where they're normal classrooms with flat floors, accessible from the corridors. Here in the middle section, left and right of the sound booth area up here, you're going to have assembly spaces where you could have children's church with gallery seating, as well as an adult education space or adult assembly space, like a choir space, where they'll have gallery seating as well. So that's the areas where we're going to leave the risers pretty close to like they are right now.
Kevin in the back. No, I don't. The one person, yeah, I'm certain.
So we're going to push this stage back, and we're going to close these side walls up. And in my mind, I understand, looking around at our air conditioning system, how difficult it is to lower the ceiling. But other than that, does it not seem like we're going to have quite a high space in here? Is it not going to seem, to me, odd to have that high of a ceiling in a smaller venue?
I don't think it's going to, so to answer your question, I don't think it's going to feel odd at all. If I were to start today and build this building from scratch the way we're talking about redesigning it, I may not go as high with the ceiling just simply for cost reasons. But we're going to do some things on the side walls here. We're going to do some changing in the way the risers and everything works around the platform. I think it's going to feel very good. It's going to feel very intimate, and it's going to create good acoustical atmosphere here for the amplified acoustics. So I think it's going to be a really good space.
Now, Donnie also told me that he was going to bring, you're going to have to talk to this, but acoustical clouds.
Yeah, some lapidaries and some adjustments to the ceiling for the acoustical side of things. And we've yet to do all the acoustical engineering. We've yet to do all the engineering because we haven't been authorized to spend that money yet. So once we do that, we'll know more details. There's a lot of details that we don't have 100% answers on yet. We have preliminary guesses and educated guesses on what we need to do. But just like the air conditioning, we're going to have to extend the diffusers out here into this area when we're doing the storage rooms. And there's a lot of things that we're going to have to figure out in the engineering. That's what design, development, construction documents are all about.
So 2 more questions. On these sides, are these being torn down inside, or this is just being framed up and we're using that space as it is?
Your second guess. It's going to be used as is. There are spaces underneath here that are already existing that we need to leave, like restrooms. And so we're going to leave the spaces as they are underneath, and we're going to use the space without the pews in there, of course, with access for storage from above and below.
Lastly, recently I came around the perimeter of this church cleaning. Is there any exterior work being done at all with this project and associated with you guys?
Yeah, so we're going to fix the roof situation first, and the roof is number one. We're also going to be doing new windows, and we're going to be doing new doors, and we're going to be doing any other necessary structural components. Cosmetically, no. One of the things we've talked about is maybe cleaning the steeple, doing some things like that.
Steeple's coming down.
Steeple's coming down.
With the roof.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. So steeple's coming off. So we'll get that completely taken care of. So, but the roof is starting in possibly 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Depending on weather and all that, what happens in the next couple of weeks. But
Others, right here.
Could we possibly come up with a plan B to relocate the baptistry instead of using a great big box in front to be a baptistry? I just can't see that being a dignified way to perform that service.
But you can only speak to that. It depends upon where you put it. But I would have to disagree on the dignified. I think that the important thing about baptism is it's done as a family, and that it's every. Well, that's a first. I think that the important thing about baptism is that it's done as a family, and that it's here. One of the things, you could ask Nathan. We had to call you long distance this morning to tell you it was time to get started, and I do think that it would be something that would be different. I don't make any bones about it, but I think that it is something that would become normal and something that people would actually like. So the second part of that is, could you create a contingency? Well, you can, for money, you can do anything. The contingencies, though, are expensive. You talked about building, because if you're going to do what we're doing, which is to keep a traditional look, it would have to be built so that it could go into the stage. And you could talk more to cost on something like that.
yeah, there are many different options being done with baptisms today in Baptist churches all around the United States. And this portable baptistry option is very popular today because of cost and because people are so close, and it becomes really a different type of celebration. We've also done them as water features out in common areas, out in the lobby, believe it or not. That is all-time a water feature and a baptistry where people can be there, family can be close, and it's on camera into the worship center. We've also built them into the floor of the platform as a baptistry. And so there's a lot of different options, a lot of different ways. We've built them into the side walls. But some of the things with trying to bring the technology online today and retrofitting an existing building, it would be pretty expensive to have that technology and allow that technology to move up and down, which is what we'd have to create with those LED walls. And that structural system and that technology would be very expensive.
So when people are baptized, if it's in the front here where we think it's going to be, how do they exit the
Sure.
baptism? Are they going
Simple.
to be wet and walk across?
No, ma'am. What you would do is, good question. And once you've seen it, it would make perfect sense. So it would always happen at the beginning of the service. You would have a team of 2 or 3 that would be your baptism. I guess in Baptist life, we're going to call them committees, because if you put more than 2 people together, it's a committee. But what they would do is that you would have steps that would come up. You would also have some type of, I don't know, rubber, neoprene, whatever it would be, that would run across. Now, we have a large sanctuary, so it'd be a longer one. They would come into the baptistry. We would baptize. At the end of the baptism, baptize in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, buried with Christ in baptism, raised to walk with newness of life. Everybody clap. You would all clap. The next thing that would happen, and this is the part that you don't think about, but this goes into our world. You would have either me or JC or somebody here that's your worship leader would say, now look around, find somebody that you haven't seen today, hug their necks, tell them that you're glad to see them. There'd be some background music playing in the background. While all of that is going on, your team would come here, help the person out of the baptistry. They would then walk out here, give them a towel, they walk out here, roll the whatever that mat is up on their way out, push the baptistry back. As soon as that's over, a minute or two, JC'd walk up and say, while you're already standing, why don't you join and sing? And you're right into your worship service. Here's the good part. Super contemporary churches have taught us some things, and there are some things we can learn from them, and they do that well. And so that's just something that we could learn, and it would look literally just like that.
Well, I'm one of those old-fashioned people who really have to think long and hard about change. I like to change very slowly. But it seems to me that a person I personally would feel more confident as it is now, just having to be in public view for just a short time, and people don't see you walk down the steps, they don't see you walk back out of it. Just the cost of it, it just seems to me, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And we could use that money somewhere else maybe, but I've never seen one of those, so I would
Yeah,
like
your
to
cost
see
on
one.
that is insignificant. I mean, you're not talking about a cost of, basically it's somebody building it and putting it together. But the cost is going to come in trying to put it in a different place where it can be moved. That's the real issue, plumbing and all of the different things that will go along with it. Others? Yes, ma'am.
What's wrong with leaving the baptistry where it is? Are you going to use that
Yes, ma'am.
space back there for something?
Yes, ma'am. If you'll look on and I was hoping, can we get those up?
But I like the idea of underneath the platform there instead of a box. I mean, why should we be baptized in a box and buried in a box?
I don't know. We got a lot of, my
You know,
granddaddy.
I mean, it's weird. And I'm like the lady behind me,
Yeah.
changes. But and if I could just change the thing, what are you going to replace the steeple with?
We'll figure something out, something aesthetic, something much lighter and less costly.
Still make it look like a
Yes,
Baptist
ma'am.
church.
Yes. Well, I would hope that after 6 years, I'm as Baptist as they come. So I'm not quite certain what the Baptist cross looks like. Maybe we'll have to go find that one.
I don't want it to be like Olive Road. They have just the cross up. But if we could even get a miniature steeple, something.
Yeah,
But, you know,
the first thing, I don't
that's not
disagree. I want to
important.
get it to stop leaking.
Yeah.
That's first, and after that we can address. And a lot of that, there's plenty of structure up there to do anything that you want to. But there's the picture. As you can see, and it's a little bit. The only thing that I see with this picture that's kind of hard to reconcile is how big this stage is, how big this area is. When you look at that, it doesn't really do it service. It's a lot bigger. But as you can see, those are LED walls that are there, and you're framing that in a deep mahogany, which gives it a more of a classic and traditional look. Others?
I certainly do not want to sow seeds of dissension, but I would love to see tremendously much more discussion. I personally think we're moving way too fast on this until we get a decision from all the people about spending $4 million in this complex.
Sure. Let me respond to
have-
that, though, because I think we need clarity. We're not talking about spending $4 to $5 million. I think there's some, if that's the thought, then that's a major misunderstanding. What we're talking about, because we've got to go to design and development before we ever know how much anything is going to cost. And so if we don't begin to move, and I'm just putting real numbers out there for you. If we don't begin to move, let's assume that appraisal takes a calendar year. Appraisal could be running us into the first quarter of 2023. That's a legitimate possibility. If we wait to the first quarter of 2023 and then we ask them to go to design and development, you're looking at 6 to 9 months for them in design and development, which is now putting you into third to fourth quarter of 2023. And then the project itself is going to be 9 to 12 months. And you're looking at us not having things repaired until well into 2024. That was a major, and I'd ask any of the deacons that have been a part of that, that was a major conversation within our deacons meeting that we had to address. It was because we've been waiting for 2 years. And one of the things is that our people have been incredible in their faithfulness, in their steadiness, in their consistency, in their stability. But I'm going to be real honest. Y'all are the choir, so I'm preaching to the choir. It is very difficult in our circumstance right now when we get a visitor that if they don't already have a first or someone that they have a close relationship with that pulls them here, our first impressions are not just not good, they're bad. And I'd ask y'all to talk about first impressions a little bit because I think it's something that we need to hear. Because first impressions, most people when they visit a church for the first time, before they ever step foot inside our sanctuary, they've already made up their mind whether or not they're going to come back the next week. Something that we don't think about it much because most everybody here, we're here every time the doors are open. And very rarely are we going to visit somewhere considering, are we going to make this our church home? But if y'all would talk a little, because y'all did our first impressions a few years back, and this was before all the damage.
Yeah, to answer your question, first impressions, they do make a decision the first 7 to 12 minutes whether or not they're coming back. And that's long before you preach, long before even maybe they get from the street to the seat. And the experiences of having the right adjacencies, and what I mean is the right location of preschool and children for young families in a secured environment, close to worship center, senior saints close to worship center, the amount of parking close to worship center, all these things are critical. And then they tell 8 to 10 people about their experience. And if it's a bad experience, they're certainly to tell 10 a lot more than if it's a good experience, unfortunately. So it's really important to get those first 7 to 12 minutes correct. And from the time people pull in the parking lot to the time they get into their seating in a worship center.
And so, Bill, I wanted to make sure that we're not voting on spending $4 to $5 million. So I want to make sure that what we're talking about now is a concept. And in order for us to be able to actually have anything, and any of you that have ever built anything, you know this process. They're going to have to go through the design and development phase to bring back to us an actual proposal for us to look at. And that's 6 to 9 months from when we say yes. So that's way down the road.
Are they willing to spend all that effort and it turned to be a negative as a note? We are ultimately speaking of spending many millions of dollars. We're speaking of tearing down buildings worth thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Honestly, in my mind, this whole complex 25 years from now won't have many people of us in here, certainly won't have me in it. I don't know, based on, and this gentleman knows more than I do of the way churches are going, but I lived in Dallas, Texas for about 5 years. I graduated from a college that was in a church that were too close to it. Very big churches. There had very, very few people. This church, we are not reaching people in our zip code. There are so many churches around, church family. I personally question us spending millions of dollars. Somehow, personally, I think we ought to try to give this church away to Baptist Hospital, let it be turned into some facility and named
Billy, I
forever.
think that
Named forever as East Brent Baptist Facility to include all the work that's been done down through the years by all the people that.
Billy, I love you, brother, but I'm pretty confident that we could vote on that one right now and it wouldn't go through. I don't think giving the church away is the right answer. This is an incredible place, and this is a place God's not done with. I could tell you story after story after story. But we do have a responsibility to be good stewards. And the next stewards for the next 5 years. And that's really what's laid before us. So I understand, but I also want to make sure and reiterate, we're not voting on spending $4 to $5 million right now. The conversation that we're having is a conversation that is to move from a concept to where we actually do have something to vote on, which is going to be 6 to 9 months from now. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that, because that's no, we're not asking anybody right now we don't have $4 to $5 million to spend. So we couldn't do that today. And we're not going to go into debt. We've been very clear about that throughout, that this project will be based upon cash. And if we don't have the cash, the project will have to be scaled back to what we can afford. We've been very clear about that through and through. So I want to make sure that we understand it. But I don't think this facility becoming a hospital. They just spent a whole lot of money to put one up across the road. I think they're pretty good right now. So, other questions? Lee.
This is a suggested only. We need a new roof on the building. That's number one priority. And we need the upstairs fixed so we can move the classes upstairs and in this building. That'll take care of most of the problems. Whether we need to do the stage or not, I don't know. I mean, that's a good concept, but like most of us, we're done sawed in. We like this. I mean, if this is functional, this will work. I've been here almost 50 years, and this is my church. This is my church, and y'all my family. So I'm just saying we need to go at this slow, a piece at a time. Take in the balcony after we get everything fixed. The people move. Take in the balcony. Fine. Do the nursery up there. I was on the original building committee, and I don't really go for taking away our riser seats, because then this auditorium's not going to be any bigger than A building was when we moved over here. And I just can't see spending that kind of money to make it like it was when we had it over there. So I'm just, we need to keep our options open. Like you say, the design and build is going to be a long process. And we just need to go at this just like we do in our own lives. We need to do this one day at a time, one thing at a time. We don't need to go all hog and jump into this thing and go crazy about it, because I'm not for contemporary. I'm here to worship. That's all I'm going to say, I guess. Thanks.
Others?
First of all, just a comment, just as a young, when we had our girls, I was already here, I was already a member, but I can imagine that somebody with very young children, to drop them off and then have a 3 to 5 minute walk to the facility, it's separated. So I just wanted to share that for those who may not be in that stage of life anymore, that I can see that, especially for the generation that's coming behind us, that's very important for them. So just wanted to share that from a younger family's perspective. And then I also have two questions. First of all, what is the seating capacity with what we use right now, not counting the sides at the top, like on the floor? What is our seating capacity? Do you know? So what would that be compared to what it's going to?
About the same.
About the same, okay. And then my other question is there a cost commitment to the design phase?
There is, absolutely.
Have we shared that? I don't remember hearing that number.
Depends on how much of it
Yeah.
we move forward with, but about $300,000.
And I think the thing that I wanted to mention this to Lee, that to keep in mind, it sounds good to say let's take it piece by piece. But I think that we need to understand that with that is going to come zeros that have commas attached to them. And I think maybe you could talk to that about the importance of, if you're doing a project of this size, specifically in this economy, it is much better and much more prudent and wise to do the project so that they can bring their people all on the field and do the project, versus scatter that over the course of however long. Maybe you could speak better to that.
Yeah, what you're getting at, time is money, so the more that we can do at one time, the better the cost, the value solution you're gonna get out of it. But of course, right now it's a crazy world. Supply chain logistics is difficult, trying to get material on site, trying to get good pricing, and getting the right teams lined up. So in order to have a price right now, you really can't hold it more than even a couple weeks at this point. So when it comes time, when we have a design that's completed, ready to go, permittable, and then we can bid the project and give you a guaranteed price on that to be able to move forward with. And really, we can't even come close to doing anything but giving an educated guess, an estimate of what we believe it would cost based on our experience. And normally we're within 10% at this point in the game, and we're usually within 2% by the time we're 50, 60% done with design development, construction documents.
Other questions?
Back to the baptistry, I'm sorry, but didn't get it in then. What is the area that's presently the baptistry? What is that going to be?
That's,
used
if
for?
you look at that's an LED wall that will take up that space.
So that eliminates
Yes, ma'am.
the president.
Yes, ma'am. Behind, have no, still be a baptistry, I'm assuming, unless you turn it into something else. Can you explain it better than me?
It is a new technology, much like a projection system, but much brighter, much clearer, and it's agnostic to light, which means basically it gives you a lot more options to do with it during productions and other things. It has a lot more ability to put various types of imagery and animation on it than you have with projections. Off-center viewing is better, all these things. So if you're a little bit off from center of looking at the screen, it's a lot brighter, it's a lot clearer. It's like moving from the old tube TVs that you had in your living room to the new TVs that you have today.
That we could leave the baptistry there and that could be raised up when we have a baptism?
Yes, it can.
Then I would vote we go for that, and I know we're not voting tonight.
Tell them, but give the, I mean, you're talking,
I don't care about the money.
so you're committing right now to write the check for it. Your last name's Toller, come on now.
Would it cost a lot of money to have that? Maybe that's how I should have
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah, so it could be designed that way, certainly. And then there's just a cost associated with that. It's hard to say without doing the engineering of what that would take.
Right.
So it's going to be on the order of close to six figures, but probably $75,000 to $100,000 to be able to raise and lower it.
7,500.
Others? Ms. Sherry here in the front.
I would just like to say that at my son's church, they have a baptistry that wouldn't be as nice as this one, but we were able to see a baptism there, and it was wonderful. It was more like family. You know, sometimes if you're not sitting right up front and you see somebody baptized back there, sometimes I don't recognize those people later because they're, you know, it's hard to see little people, especially up there. But in Ben's church, when they had their baptisms, it was much like you were saying, probably not as nice as what you were saying, but it was a family affair. It, you know, it was really somebody that's coming into your family. It was wonderful.
Others.
Those bathrooms up there behind, are they just, they gonna be gutted out, or are they just?
Bathrooms.
Okay, is there any other be occupied back there? I mean, is there gonna be any kind of, anything being used for back there? Or is it just a set of bathrooms?
Bathrooms. Others. Yes, ma'am. The question was theater seats versus pews, and it comes a capacity issue. Theater seats, you're going to get closer to 90% capacity, whereas with pews, you're going to be more at a 65 to 75% capacity before it feels full. A good for instance of that is if I were to tell you there's close to 800 seats in here, and then I were to ask you how many people were here this morning, you'd be amazed how it's an optical illusion. You think there's a lot more people in here because the fact is that we spread out. We just do. Theater seats does two things. Number one, you have a seat. Number two, when you roll the theater seat back, it gives you a couple more inches, which makes it wider. I get it. I'm a traditionalist. I get the whole the pew versus theater seat thing, but I'll tell you, I don't mind telling you, I was the one in staff meeting that was, we need pews, we need pews, we need pews. But the reality of it is, from a long-term perspective, it's not the same battle as it used to be. You know, back in the day, you were a rebel if you got pews. I'll tell you, the funny thing is now, Tim's going to laugh. You're a rebel if you get pews today. The cost is crazy because of lumber. And then the other side that you have to deal with pews is, I just want you to look around. Let's be real with you. Look around. Maybe the first time you've looked at your pews. They're terrible shape. Terrible shape. Falling apart. We've got places that need to be fixed. With a theater seat, you just pull that one up and fix it. And that's, over the long term, from a cost perspective, that's how they sold me on it. It's much, much more cost prohibitive. And it's beneficial, it's more beneficial from a cost standpoint to have theater seats versus pews. In today's world, it just, people don't walk in because most everybody that's building churches or redoing churches, they're using theater seats. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, there was a national study actually we put out with Tom Rayner and Lifeway. Studied all demographics, all ages, and it was 60 to 40 for a worship center preferring theater seats over pews, all age groups. Actually, 70 to 30 was most age groups, but 60 to 40 was the worst age group. But yes, you can put children right next to you. Arms can come up.
Yeah.
And it's only 8 pounds to lower a chair, so if your child's more than 8 pounds, it's no problem. They're quiet. The technology's come a long way. And there's all varying sizes. And the lowest we would ever recommend is 21 inches in width. 22 is the goal. You have 21, 22, 23, and 24-inch theater seats, and you can fit a real large Baptist in 21 inches. Believe me. So it's they're really comfortable, and it's what's been preferred in most places today.
Yes, being part of the music team, where are you potentially going to put the crow's nest, the board and all that? Is it going to be on the floor still?
Front of house is going to be back here with access to a production room.
Okay, but it is going to be up, elevated?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you planning on building a drum booth and all that? What I'm seeing up there, I just see an acoustic kit up there.
It hadn't been part of the discussion. I couldn't say yes or no because that really hadn't been a part. It could be. I mean, we could absolutely build one.
Right.
It just hadn't been at this point in the conversation. Like we just threw a piano and just threw that on there so that you'd have something to look at.
But I mean, there's potential for amp isolation and all that.
Sure.
And you are going to fly the PA?
Yeah, there's a lot to be designed in that aspect, but a lot of choices to be made.
Right.
We haven't
Those are
talked-
just musician questions.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, we haven't talked about whether we're going with inner ears, whether we're going with boom mics, whether we're going with flying the subs, putting the subs in the platform. None of that's been discussed really in detail yet.
Others. Right here, Laura.
Just occurred, the sale of G&H, does that include the field? I guess we would gain some field area with demolition, but
More than likely, that would, to get your most bang for your buck, that would be the whole thing
okay.
to the cemetery line.
But that would not include the field
No,
behind the
that
cemetery?
would not.
Right.
That
So we'd still have
backfield.
that.
Believe it or not, that thing's like a weird triangle, the way that is shaped. But no, that does not include that.
I'm sorry if this has been discussed in a previous meeting, but the land that we had discussed selling on the other side of the building, is that now not, or are we
It's
still
not on the
looking to
market.
sell it, or
It's not
just
on the, it's
taking
not
it
on the
off?
market.
Oh, okay. I'm not planning to put it on the market, so we would gain that on the other side, maybe?
We would have to have that. If you sold the other part, you would have to have at least the majority of that property for parking and for those things. Of course, you know, everything's for sale if somebody walks in with a, you know, somebody walks in with and says, hey, but no, that's not actively, because you're going to have for codes and, you know, others.
In talking about doing away with these other buildings, could you address the cost that that we have to maintain those now?
Sure, and I think one of the things that going to be beneficial in this conversation, and I appreciate Lee bringing it up, is we need to segment and because there's conversation. Each conversation it's independent, but it connects. So when we're talking about a building is valued at $1.8 million. Right now, the claim for a building, I want to say, is 800 and something thousand. Is what what we're filed with the insurance. When we talk because I had Tim come over here immediately when we first started looking at doing costs and repairs, and I asked him, I said, so what's it going to cost us to fix this building up? And he looked at me and basically told me that it's not worth it. Here's your problem. You're going to have to bring that building up to today's code to use it, which means that I'll just go through some things that I know for fact will have to happen. Your entrances, none of them are ADA accessible. All your entrances would have to be changed. We don't have sprinklers anywhere in the building. You don't have an elevator in the building. You can't put any more carpet in the building until asbestos is abated, because if you've not been over there and probably wouldn't know this, but it's about 3 or 4 layers of carpet. And we're at the point now that you're about to hit your head on the ceiling in some places because we've put so much carpet on top of carpet. And so you're going to have to abate. The worship part there in a building has been abated, but that's the only part that has. Everything else in A would have to be abated. I'm fairly confident the entirety of the electrical system would have to be gutted and redone. We're fairly confident that the entirety of the HVAC system, all the ductwork would have to be completely gutted and redone. We know that in order to put a roof on there to meet code, we're going to have to lift the HVAC units that are on top of the building, which is a crazy cost. Just to lift those so that you can get some form of a grade, because what we have up there right now doesn't meet code. All in all, for a building right now that's valued at $1.8 million, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong, but in today's world, you could easily spend $3 million just to get us back in the building. That's not making it nice. That's taking an old building and making it meet code. And so, from a cost standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. B is much the same thing. B, to get in there with B, it's the very same issues that you run into with A you're going to run into with B. And it's just the cost of it is crazy. It's high. So that conversation is an altogether different conversation. But there's the other part that we need to understand. We can't get insurance on those buildings right now. In order for us to get insurance, we're going to have to spend money in order to get insurance. But when we do get insurance, we were spending $120,000, $130,000 a year is what we were spending on insurance. I asked Anthony, who's our agent, what is he seeing right now? And he said we could very easily, if we had just the same policies then that we have now, we could very easily be spending $300,000 to $400,000 to insure all of this property. On top of that, a building is not energy efficient. It's matter of fact, it's an awful building when it comes to energy. We spend a fortune over there in electricity. And so I'll just give you real numbers. If we were to continue the path that we're on, within the next 5 years, if our budget, which is stabilized between the $1.2 and $1.3 million mark, we'd be spending about 75% of our budget to maintain and insure buildings. Number one, that's not good stewardship. That's not living for the mission, and it's also not sustainable. It's just over the course of time, that's just not a sustainable. So we're going to have a smaller footprint. I mean, we cannot. I understand it. Trust me, I get it. But we have to address it. And the same thing with G. So A and B is its own unique circumstance. G is condemned. We have been told by an engineer, and the word that was used by the engineer is the threat of imminent collapse. And so when you hear that, specifically with what went down in South Florida a couple of years ago with the condos that fell, you can't play around with that. We immediately, once we got that letter, we've been out of there since then. Now, we've had conversations of if you were going to attempt to bring G back, what's it going to take? Well, what we've been told is that you're going to have to go all the way down to the base of where the roof structure is and put a new truss system, which is seriously expensive. And guys, we have spent through the years a lot of money on G building. We've spent a lot of money on G building. And there just comes a point that we have to say, okay, what is going to be the best financial decision for us to make over the course of the long term? And for us to continue to pour money in the places where, honestly, this is the artery. This is where everybody is coming. This is the place where we really need to focus our attention. And so to make the project possible, what we're going to have to do is that we're going to have to say, we're going to take the insurance that would be applicable, but instead of using it towards A and towards B and towards G, we're going to apply it to making this a first-class worship center for the future. Now, I realize, and I've heard the conversation about going smaller. Well, everyone's going smaller. The reality of it was, and I'm just going to be downright honest with you, churches never were as large as they said they were. That's just the truth. And in today's world, you can't get anybody to actually tell you the honest to goodness truth about numbers, because it's way too easy in today's internet world to fudge the numbers and to deviate from reality. For instance, I know for a fact some of your larger churches within Northwest Florida, they throw their numbers out there and everybody sits back and says, oh my goodness, that's awesome. Well, they're counting every person that clicked on once on Facebook as an attender. And that's just not real. That's not real. So one of the things I think is important to understand is that these guys are the largest church builders in the country. Is it fair to say that right now, more than half of the work that you're doing is on right-sizing buildings?
We're doing an awful lot of right-sizing worship centers, yes, sir.
And I think that what you've got to understand, so we're at right now, let's be real with our numbers. We're 250-300 is a fair number, is where we are when you count the kids and the children. With 799, that's not 250 to 300 that are in here. We're averaging about 200 or so that are in here on Sunday mornings. Well, you can triple before it ever becomes an issue. Our Sunday school numbers, we would be able to triple what we would have as capacity just in this building before it ever became an issue. Well, then what do you do next? Well, you go to 2 services, and now you don't triple. You can have 6 times the numbers. You say, well, what if you have 6 times? Now, listen, what I'm about to say you may not like. I've said it to you since I've been here, so this won't be the first time that you've heard it. If a church reaches the point that you've got 800 seats, and you're going to 2 services, and then you need to go to 3 services, you don't need to have a larger building. You need to take 100 people, and you need to go plant a church somewhere in the community that doesn't have a church. It's a new model. We've got too many Taj Mahals that now are having to be right-sized, and we're having to spend a fortune to come into and to try to fix. And the deferred maintenance on these big places are just incredible. And so I feel more than comfortable with 800, with the understanding as well that with the knocking out of a couple of walls, your 800 could very easily become 12 to 1300 because you're keeping the elevation on your wings. So if a church reaches the point that you've got a 1,200 seat sanctuary and you're needing to go to a second service, well, we're going to have a lot bigger issues than just the size of the building at that point. A lot, not bad issues, but just bigger. And so I don't think that the size is something that we need to be concerned with. I do think that what we do need to be concerned with is the cost of maintaining this facility. We just can't keep doing what we're doing. There's just no way. From an electricity standpoint, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, do you know how much bug spray gets sprayed on this campus? It's incredible. Water, gas, it's expensive. And so what we're hoping to do is to right-size it so that we can be much more economical with our costs. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and looking at the roof once more, everybody, I can't say everybody, but FPL pushing this solar. Has that been given some consideration? I don't like it, I don't want it, but, you know, it is out there, and perhaps it should be discussed.
I drive a diesel. Yeah. So I wish I could put a solar panel on it right now because diesel's so expensive. But no, ma'am, there's been no conversation at all about solar. I don't know anything about it. Other questions? Come there next.
I was going to ask, nobody said anything about it, but, you know, currently we have to go up steps, down steps, and down and down and down more. Is there going to be something to get into the choir loft without doing that?
You have an elevator. Yeah, you have an elevator here, and it'll take you directly to. Are you talking about the choir loft here? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking up there. No, ma'am. You'll have to have steps to get onto the platform. But you'll have the lift for handicap access, which all of my young guys have been telling me I need to be using on a weekly basis. I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. There was a question here in the back, JC.
I was wondering if there was going to be handicap accessibility, like a ramp or whatever, at this entrance over here.
We talked about that, yes, ma'am. And one of the things that I'm asking them to do is to give us a ramp. Thank you for asking that question. The goal is, by moving the children in the preschool here, what we'd like to do is to create all senior parking on this side. So when we redo the parking lot in front of the FLC, and then when all of the other parking that's already there, that would be all senior parking. And I've asked them if they can give us a ramp into this main entrance here on the north side coming in. Yes, ma'am. Others?
I didn't intend to ask a question. I was just going to listen to everybody else's, but I'm sure you've counted all of, and I'll just take the adult Sunday school classes, and that the rooms that are being planned, there's a room for each class, or are you trying, or were you going to combine classes and try
We're
and do
taking
that?
what we have now, and every class will have a room, and we actually are going to be able, for the beginning. Now, if we grow, this would change, but we also will have students we're going to move students up on the second floor. So all of our Sunday school would meet here in this building. Now, if we need to add some Sunday schools, then of course what we would do is the students, they're going to have their own space over at the second floor of the FLC. So the students could easily move over to the second floor of the FLC, and then that would open up more rooms here. But yes, ma'am, every class that we have now would have a room.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Don't tear your knee up, it hurts. The question was in the end of the day, yes, we would have this building, and we would have the entirety of the FLC, which would include E-building, which is technically connected, I guess, but that would be your offices. So those would be the buildings that we would have. You still have a warehouse. We have a metal warehouse in the back that's here that we would have. Others. Dion.
We're sitting here because of Sally and other storms that have come. And I'm sure the architect has and thought of this and thought it through and everything else. But how well is the new structure inside and other buildings with the roof and everything else, how well prepared are we going to be for other storms?
Yeah, I'm going to let you take that. I ain't.
Well, it's a great question. And some of the code changes that have been implemented over the last 10 years have been frustrating for us in the industry because it increased costs to building. And it makes life a little more difficult. And, you know, all of us don't enjoy those changes because we want to build for the cost we were building for 20 years ago. But the good news is Hurricane Michael over here in Panama City that just came through has proven a few things. Number one, it's proven that these advances in code have done well. I can tell you that Highland Park Baptist Church, which we built recently, 2 of the buildings over there, and as a hurricane came right up, the eye of the storm came right up 285, and it was right on their campus. There were churches north and south of there that hadn't been updated in 20, 30 years, destroyed, laying level, nothing left of them. And that proof of technology and the advancements in engineering, that building was still there. Was there damage? Yeah, there was some damage. But the buildings that were most recently built, not nearly, hardly any damage after a Cat 5 hurricane. Now, the older buildings surrounding it, there was a lot more damage. So the whole campus got upgraded. All that to say, upgrading the glass, the windows, the doors, upgrading these kind of things, upgrading the electrical system with energy code that we have today, all these things help on utilities, maintenance, and the longevity of the building. So they are good things. Now, I'll tell you, structurally, again, this building is structurally sound. There are twin T's back here spanning